Welcome, my name is Catherine. This week is Titanic Tribute Week, and in this video, I'm going to tell the story of the musicians that were hired to entertain the passengers aboard this ship. My resource for my information comes from this book called On a Sea of Glass, and the story about the musicians is found on page 177 and 179. And also in the appendix, in part J, it goes into more detail about where they played. Did they play inside or outside? What was the last song they played? And did they abandon the ship at what time? And it's a very detailed history of the Titanic from when it was being built in Belfast, Ireland. And it takes us through the tragic sinking in the North Atlantic. And most of what we know about the Titanic is from the survivors of the incident, as well as Robert Ballard finding the Titanic in 1985. And I also have in my collection the soundtrack by the movie from James Cameron in 1997. I have this in my collection for the one song, My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. And the musical arrangement is by James Horner. The lyrics are by Will Jennings. And I like the meaningful lyrics in this song, and I think Celine Dion gives an amazing vocal performance in the song. Now I'm going to give you a little history background of the Titanic, just to remember numbers and dates and times. So the RMS Titanic was a British passenger and mail-carrying ocean liner operated by the White Star Line. Its maiden voyage was April 10th of 1912, and it started in Southampton, England. The 8 musicians boarded the Titanic at Southampton, and then it sailed to Cherbourg, France, and then to Queensland, Ireland. Its destination was New York City, and there were 2,208 passengers aboard. The musicians of the RMS Titanic all lost their lives when the ship sank. They played music intending to calm the passengers for as long as they could, while crewmen put people in the lifeboats and launched these. And all of these men in the Titanic orchestra, including the piano player, are recognized for their heroism. They traveled as second-class passengers, which meant they were not part of the White Star crew, and the musicians were contracted to White Star by a Liverpool company called CW and FM Black, who placed musicians on British liners in those days. So for this reason, it's believed they were voluntary actions when they played the music. They weren't told by the captain. The captain could tell them to stop, but he wouldn't tell them to play. So they functioned in 2 groups before the accident. The first group was a group of 5 called the Quintet, and it was led by official band leader and violinist Wallace Hartley. He was 33 years old, and he would have been the one to give directions to the other members. The other men were John Clark, a bassist, age 28, Jock Hume, violinist, age 21, Percy Taylor played the cello at age 40, John Wesley Woodward, a cello player at the age of 32. And this group played music at tea time, after dinner concerts, and at Sunday services. The second group was a trio of 3 men. George Crins played the violin. He was 23 years old. Roger Bricot, he was from France. He played the cello, age 20, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. William Brayley played the piano, and he was 24. Now these men played at the restaurants, the a la carte restaurant, and the Café Parisien. The Titanic hit the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, off the coast of Nova Scotia. And 6 of the 16 watertight compartments were damaged beneath the surface of the water. And the Titanic could stay afloat if 4 compartments were compromised or flooded. So it took a while for them to figure out what was going on. The crewmen below the deck in Deck F told the crewmen above what about the damage. So Thomas Andrew, naval architect who designed the ship, was consulted, and he explained to Captain Smith they needed to evacuate the ship. Titanic was definitely going to sink, and the plan to evacuate the ship would begin soon. And I want to point out that all passengers were woken up, including the third-class passengers that were down below in the lower decks E. Now, in the James Cameron movie, there was a scene where it showed them locking the passengers so they couldn't get up to the upper decks. And that's fiction. That never happened. All the passengers in third class were evacuated through a hallway called Scotland Yard, and they were taken up the grand staircase to the upper decks. And on the passenger list of survivors, you'll see that there's children and women from third class that survived. So sometime between 12:15 a.m. and 12:20, first class passengers could hear cheerful music playing from the upper decks. And it is thought that they started in the first class lounge near the doorway because of the cold temperatures outside. It'd be difficult for them to play in the cold, and it would affect the tension on their instruments, and they'd have to tune them if they played out in the cold. And later, it was witnessed that they took a break, leaving their instruments, so they could go get their life vests. And it is believed the band stopped playing shortly after 2 p.m. We know they stopped because Wallace Hartley's violin was found inside its leather case when his body was later found. And it's thought that the last song they played is called Nearer to God to Thee. But some passengers said they played a song called Autumn, and that's discussed in detail in the appendix of the book. But most people accept Nearer to God to Thee as being the last song they played. So the very last lifeboats that were floated off the ship happened at 2:15, and it's thought that the musicians abandoned ship and jumped into the ocean about 2:05. And I can show you an illustration in the book. It's found in the appendix. They would have jumped the ship when the nose was where the bow of the ship was down about 7 degrees. So it would be this picture right here, if you can see that. So if they were on the bridge went underwater when the bridge was 8 degrees down, about 2:09. So they had to have jumped ship prior to 2:09, which means they didn't play to the very end and go down with the ship as it was sinking. So the Titanic completely sank at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th near Halifax, Nova Scotia. 1,500 people lost their lives, and 712 survived in the lifeboats, and they were rescued about 4 a.m. by the Carpathia. Truly a tragic event with all the loss of lives. So lesson learned, after the tragedy, never again would large passenger ships sail without lifeboats for all. Marconi telegraph machines were to be operated for 24 hours because there was a ship called the Californian that was 19 miles from the Titanic, and their Marconi telegraph machine was off. And ships to identify icebergs to warn other ships of danger were put into service. So in the fall of this year, in 2024, I'm going to be visiting the Pigeon Forge, Tennessee Titanic Museum, and I want to try to film the music room dedicated to the musicians on the Titanic, and I'll try to photograph the passenger list as well. I don't think I can film the whole museum. I'll have to ask permission even to do this. I'm going to leave some links in the description for further learning if you're interested. It's Sam's channel called Historic Travels. He's a maritime history channel. The first video is called The Story of Nearer My God to Thee, why it's accepted that that was the last song. It goes into great detail. It's about a 10-minute video. The story of Wallace Hartley's violin, how they found it, and the story, what it went through all this time to where it is today. And I promise you won't be bored. Sam's a very good storyteller and he does a good job on his channel. So if you learned something new today from this video, please consider hitting the like button. I thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day.